It was a quiet Thursday morning when everything changed. The kind of morning where the sun spills through the blinds just right, the coffee hits perfect, and the silence feels earned. I was sitting at the kitchen island, skimming through emails, still in sweatpants, wondering if I'd even bother changing today. My house, my sanctuary, was as it had always been. Peaceful, solid, mine. Paid in full 5 years ago, title clear, no mortgage, no tenants, no drama. Just me, my books, my work, and the life I'd built brick by brick. So when the doorbell rang, I wasn't expecting anything other than maybe a package or a neighbor asking to borrow a ladder. I certainly wasn't expecting a smug woman with highlighted hair, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard standing beside a massive moving truck in my driveway. She looked like a walking stereotype. Power-walking yoga mom turned suburban dictator. She smiled like she was doing me a favor. "Hi. I'm Karen," she said, extending a manicured hand I didn't take. "I'm the new owner of this property. The HOA said you'd be out already." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "I bought this house," she repeated slowly, like I was the one struggling with comprehension. "From the HOA. It's all been handled. You're not supposed to be here." I stared at her for a solid 3 seconds, waiting for the punchline. None came. Instead, she held out a set of keys, my keys, and a stack of papers that looked suspiciously like a property transfer document. "You're at the wrong house," I said calmly, though my heartbeat was already rising. "This house is not for sale. It's never been for sale. And I'm not part of your HOA." Her smile vanished. "There's no mistake," she snapped. "You live in an HOA neighborhood. I bought this house legally. If you've got a problem, you can take it up with the board. But as of today, I own this property, so I'm going to need you to leave." A security SUV rolled up behind her, white with the HOA logo painted on the side, something they'd added a year ago when the new board took over. The 2 guards stepped out like they were starring in a low-budget SWAT movie, arms folded, sunglasses, mirroring mine. "Is there a problem here, Miss Karen?" one of them asked. "She's trespassing," Karen snapped, pointing at me. "The HOA said this would be vacated by today." The guard turned to me, clearly already on her side. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to cooperate. There's been some confusion about the ownership here, but the HOA has approved the sale." I felt my blood freeze. Confusion. They were talking like this wasn't my home, like I didn't have a deed with my name on it filed at the county office, like my mortgage-free status meant nothing. I crossed my arms. "I'm not going anywhere. You're all going to want to leave before I call the police." Karen actually laughed. "Oh, honey, you might want to check your paperwork. The HOA owns this land. You never signed the updated covenant, so technically, you're not even supposed to be here." "I never joined the HOA," I snapped. "I opted out when the neighborhood voted 10 years ago. That paperwork was recorded. I've got the documentation." She waved her clipboard at me. "Things change. The board changed. The bylaws changed. And your house? It's mine now." And that was the moment I realized something much bigger was happening. Not a prank, not a misunderstanding, a full-scale attack. They thought they could erase me. They thought wrong. I still remember the day I bought this house. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. I'd worked my ass off through law school, took every miserable case that came my way, and lived off instant ramen long past the point of it being charming. But it paid off, literally. The day I signed that final document, wired the full payment, and held that freshly printed deed in my hands. Man, there's no feeling like that. It wasn't just a house. It was freedom. Single story, corner lot, big windows, and a wraparound porch. Exactly what I'd dreamed of since the first time I pulled a double shift and thought, one day, I'm going to come home to peace. And for a while I did. Then, the HOA happened. A few years after I moved in, some of the newer residents started floating the idea of a homeowners association. They said it would keep the neighborhood beautiful, protect property values, and encourage a sense of community. I knew what that actually meant. Someone was going to get power hungry, and the rest of us would be forced to play along. But there was a loophole. When the proposal went to vote, I made damn sure to read every word of the draft charter. The bylaws were clear. Homeowners could opt out if they signed a formal waiver before the charter was ratified. So I filed mine, got it notarized, and submitted it in person, with a copy sent to the county clerk. Ironclad. I wasn't about to pay monthly dues for someone else to tell me what color mulch I could use. The vote passed. The HOA was formed. I stayed out. For a while, it was fine. They planted some trees, added a playground, posted some friendly newsletters about block parties and garage sales. Nothing I couldn't ignore. But then Karen got on. The board. She didn't start out as the villain. She hosted wine nights, brought over banana bread, smiled with all her teeth. But it didn't take long before the mask slipped. One day, she was reminding me that my lawn was a little long. The next, she was leaving pamphlets in my mailbox titled "Why Voluntary Participation Hurts Us All." Subtle, but not subtle enough. I knew exactly what she was doing. Soft pressure, the kind that builds until people break, and not just with me. She started targeting anyone who hadn't opted into the HOA. Code violation warnings, photos taken of front yards, anonymous complaints about noise that mysteriously lined up with when non-HOA members hosted guests. The kicker? I could have shut it down. Hell, I'm a lawyer. Real estate and civil litigation are my bread and butter. I knew the laws. I knew their limitations. Half the crap they were doing wouldn't hold up in court. But I didn't want to be that neighbor, the one who sues over everything, who gets a reputation, who turns peace into a war zone. So I let it slide. I thought I could outlast them. Keep my head down, stay off the radar, and let their little power trip burn itself out. That was my mistake, because Karen didn't want order. She wanted control. And when she realized she couldn't get it from me through letters, warnings, or fake smiles, she decided to take it. Literally. That moving truck, those fake papers, the smug way she stood on my porch like she owned it, that wasn't sudden. That was planned, deliberate. An ambush in broad daylight, and now it was personal. See, I had been patient. I'd shown restraint. But if there's one thing I've learned in courtrooms and boardrooms alike, it's this. Some people only understand consequences. Not warnings, not fairness, just consequences. And Karen, she was about to learn exactly what those looked like. It was supposed to be a simple 30-minute errand. Groceries, gas, and a quick drive through the car wash. I even left a load of laundry in the dryer, expecting to fold it when I got back. But when I pulled into my driveway, something was off. The truck was still there. The same moving truck from earlier, now partially unloaded. My porch had boxes stacked on it. Someone had tossed a welcome mat over mine, one of those tacky ones that said, "Live, laugh, love." And the blinds in the living room window? They were closed. I never closed them. My stomach dropped as I climbed out of my car. I went up to the front door, pulled out my keys, and froze. The lock was different. It wasn't even subtle. A whole new deadbolt, freshly installed. I tried my key anyway. No dice. I knocked. Then I pounded. Nothing. Seconds later, the door creaked open, and there she was, Karen, wearing yoga pants and holding a latte like she'd lived there for years. "Oh, you're back already," she said, feigning surprise. "I thought you'd left for good." "I live here," I said through gritted teeth. "Open the damn door." She shrugged and stepped out just enough to block the entrance. "You don't live here anymore. Like I said, this is my house now." Before I could respond, two movers came down the hallway carrying a flat-screen TV. My TV, and I completely lost it. I stepped forward, but Karen raised her phone like she was waiting for me to get physical. "Don't," she warned. "Just don't. I've already called the HOA security in case you tried to cause a scene." That was it. I called the police. They showed up 10 minutes later, 2 officers, professional but already looking tired. I explained the situation, showed them my driver's license with the address, told them the house was mine, and I'd never sold it. Karen, ever the actress, put on her most innocent face and handed over a stack of papers. "Here's the deed," she said. "The HOA transferred the property to me. Everything's been filed. I have keys, possession, and a bill of sale. If there's a problem, it's with the HOA, not me." The cops glanced at the papers, then back at me. "Well, ma'am," one of them said carefully, "this looks like a civil dispute. If she has documentation and possession, we can't remove her without a court order. I'd recommend taking this to civil court as soon as possible." "So you're telling me someone can just walk into a home, change the locks, and claim it's theirs, and you won't do anything?" "I'm telling you," he said, "that you need to get a judge involved." Before I could respond, another SUV pulled up, this one marked HOA enforcement. Out stepped a man I recognized from one of their newsletters, James, the new HOA president. Late 30s, expensive haircut, and that same smug grin Karen always wore like perfume. "Ah, Miss Redacted," he said as he approached. "I understand there's some confusion. Let me clear it up." He handed me a folded packet of paper. Under the new bylaws passed last quarter, the HOA was granted eminent domain powers within the community boundary. You didn't maintain membership, didn't pay dues, and according to Section 13C, properties deemed in violation of covenant alignment may be reclaimed and redistributed. He actually said that with a straight face, like this was North Korea and I had just lost my house because I didn't hang the right flag. "You people are insane," I said quietly. He gave me a condescending smile. "I suggest you speak with your attorney." "I am an attorney." His smile faltered just slightly, but the damage was done. The police wouldn't intervene. The HOA wouldn't back down. And Karen was inside my house, flipping through channels on my television while eating grapes from my fridge. I stood there for another 5 minutes, holding the papers like they might catch fire in my hands, and then walked away. Temporarily. Anyway, I crashed with a friend across town that night. Told them it was a legal emergency, didn't go into detail. I needed space to think, to plan, to burn the rage out of my veins before it made me sloppy. The next morning I went into lawyer mode. I pulled every document I had, the original deed, the tax records, the county filings. I requested a full title search from the recorder's office. I logged into my home surveillance system, still active, still uploading, and began cataloging every second Karen spent inside my house. Then I filed records requests for the HOA charter, every bylaw revision, and the minutes from their board. Meetings? I wanted to see exactly when they gave themselves the right to seize property, and more importantly, if they'd done it legally. I combed through emails I'd received from them over the years, looking for inconsistencies, threats, anything that would hint this wasn't just a rogue board, but a coordinated operation, and the deeper I looked, the more cracks I found. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a scam, a scheme, a hostile takeover wrapped in fake legality. They thought I'd roll over, thought I'd file a complaint, wait a few months, maybe settle quietly. They forgot who I was. They wanted a fight. They were going to get one. I didn't sleep much those first few nights, not from fear. Those days were long behind me, but from the simmering rage that never quite cooled. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just stare at the ceiling, my mind racing through court strategies and legal precedents like I was back in my bar exam prep days. By day 3, the fire in my gut had turned into something else. Cold fury, focused, sharpened. I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like what I am, a lawyer and a damn good one. If they wanted a civil court case, they were about to get one. But I wasn't just going to win. I was going to expose them. First, I pulled the HOA's bylaws, the official ones, the ones registered with the county at the time of the HOA's formation, and then I compared them to the revised ones James had smugly handed me. The difference was immediate and illegal. According to the original charter, any bylaw change involving property rights or financial assessments required a 2/3 vote of all homeowners, not just current HOA members. There were no such votes recorded, no announcements, nothing in the minutes. They'd fabricated the bylaw revision to grant themselves eminent domain power, something no HOA legally has in our state. Next, I checked the county property records. That's when things got really dirty. A month ago, long before Karen showed, up on my doorstep, The HOA had filed an abandonment of property notice for my home. It stated the property had been unoccupied for over 90 days, was falling into disrepair, and had no verifiable owner. All of it was total fiction. I'd been living there, paying utilities, maintaining everything. They'd forged the inspection report and used a phony signature from a non-existent compliance officer. Then came the shell company. It took some digging, pulling business licenses, cross-checking addresses, and running names through public registries. But I finally found it. A company called Silver Pine Acquisitions LLC had purchased my property at a sham auction for $12,000. That was less than a tenth of the home's market value. And who was listed as Silver Pine's managing partners? Karen, James, and the HOA treasurer. They'd sold my home to themselves through a shell company, on paper of course, then transferred ownership directly to Karen 2 weeks later. Everything was kept internal, buried under legal jargon and backdated signatures. I was never notified because they never intended to do this legally. It was a con from the start, but they'd gotten sloppy, greedy, arrogant. Emails started surfacing, some from leaks, others from poorly secured HOA archives. I found threads between Karen and James with subject lines like "clean sweep" and "taking back the block." One in particular made my blood boil. Karen: "One less freeloader in the way. Can't wait to put a hot tub on that deck." James: "She's a lawyer, but not one who's going to see this coming. Trust me, we've covered our tracks." Except they hadn't. Not nearly well enough. I traced community complaints from other residents, ones who'd also resisted joining the HOA. 3 different families had been pressured into selling after suddenly being hit with fabricated fines, noise violations, or citations for things as ridiculous as mailbox height. One family had surveillance footage mysteriously wiped after they challenged a fence ruling. This wasn't a rogue decision. It was a full-scale racket. They extorted dues, strong-armed holdouts, and when that didn't work, they just took. Fraudulently, with forged documents and phony shell companies. They embezzled HOA funds to pay off lawyers and inspectors, all the while pretending to uphold neighborhood standards. I started compiling everything: dates, copies, screen grabs, PDFs, notarized statements from neighbors who were too scared to speak until I promised them anonymity. I created a case file so thorough, so airtight, it practically hummed with potential. This wasn't just civil fraud anymore. It was criminal. Karen had kicked the wrong hornet's nest, and now I had a paper trail leading right to her hands, complete with timestamps, signatures, and her own smug words in writing. They thought I wouldn't know what was coming, but I did. And now it was their turn not to see what was about to hit. Then the morning I filed the lawsuit, I wore my best gray suit and brought coffee for the courthouse clerk. Not because I was trying to curry favor, just because it felt right to walk in calm and prepared. No drama, no theatrics. Just a simple civil complaint, backed by 143 pages of exhibits, a motion for emergency injunctive relief, and a temporary restraining order against both Karen and the HOA. Within 48 hours, the judge reviewed the case. The restraining order was signed and delivered. Karen and the HOA were officially barred from making any further changes to the property until the matter was resolved in court. I made sure to have the notice served publicly in front of their little clubhouse during their weekly HOA neighborhood gathering, right as Karen was passing out flyers for some wine and cheese mixer. The server called her by name and handed her the envelope like it was a wedding invitation. From the look on her face, you'd think someone had told her Rosé was canceled forever. Of course, petty people do petty things. The restraining order hadn't arrived yet when Karen decided to retaliate. She had just enough time and just enough spite to go full scorched earth on the house. When I got access to my security footage, I saw it all. She called in a few of the same movers from before, and they didn't bring anything in this time. They took things out. My dining room table? Gone. My leather recliner? Gone. Art off the walls, dishes out of the cabinets, even the damn ceiling fan in the living room. She wasn't moving. She was looting. And the stuff she didn't take? She trashed it. Glass shattered on the floors, spray paint on the kitchen, Counters. What looked like wine splashed across the carpet. One camera caught her smiling straight at the lens and flipping it off before yanking it off the wall. It hurt. Of course it did. That was my home, my sanctuary, my peace. But it didn't throw me off. It only added fuel to the fire, because now it wasn't just about winning. It was about finishing this. The court set the date for a preliminary hearing too. Out. That gave me just enough time to go full courtroom war mode. Subpoenas went out to the county clerk's office. For all official property transaction records, the HOA board. For internal emails, meeting minutes, and all communications regarding my property. The title company Karen claimed handled the transfer. The shell company, Silver Pine Acquisitions LLC, which I had traced to Karen and James. I also brought in a forensic accountant to trace HOA funds, where they were going, who was approving the checks, and how much had been rerouted into the shell company. And I hired a real estate fraud expert, someone who could look a jury in the eye and explain in plain English exactly how Karen's entire paper trail was one big scam. Then came the best part. I leaked the story. A trusted contact at the local paper ran it under the headline, HOA illegally seizes home of local lawyer, forgery, fraud, and fallout in quiet suburb. The reaction was immediate. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Comments flew like shrapnel. Wait, Karen did this? That house wasn't abandoned. She lived there. If they can take hers, what's stopping them from taking ours? Karen tried damage control. She posted a long rant about protecting property values and how this unfortunate misunderstanding is being exploited for attention. James chimed in with some bureaucratic nonsense about legal reviews and internal processes, but no one was buying it. The tide was turning, and then the day came. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it was charged. A few reporters sat in the back, some neighbors too. Karen strutted in like she was on her way to a charity gala, heels clicking across the tile, hair perfectly curled. James and the HOA treasurer followed behind her, smug and confident in matching navy blazers. I walked in alone. No entourage. Just my case file, my laptop, and the quiet certainty of someone who knew they were about to take back everything. Karen's attorney opened with a bunch of fluff. How the HOA had acted within its rights. How the plaintiff had failed to maintain. Good standing, how the bylaws had been updated accordingly. They waved around a few documents, mostly blurry photocopies and selectively cropped PDFs. Then it was my turn. I started with a quiet voice. Calm, collected. No grand gestures, just facts. Exhibit A. The original HOA charter, showing that any bylaw change required a full homeowner vote. No record of any vote, no notices, no signatures. Exhibit B. The county records. My deed, recorded, active, untarnished until their forged abandonment notice appeared, signed by someone who didn't exist in the employee registry. Exhibit. Unaku the shell company paperwork. Karen, James, and the treasurer listed as founding members. A paper sale to themselves. No auction, no legal process. Exhibit D. The emails. Karen calling me a freeloader. James bragging that I wouldn't see it coming. The two of them discussing their plan like Bond villains with a homeowners board. Exhibit E. The forensic audit showing misappropriated HOA funds, thousands directed to accounts linked to their shell company, all labeled as property compliance operations. Then came the expert witnesses. Cool clinical damning. By the time I finished, Karen wasn't smiling anymore. She looked like someone slowly realizing the train she was riding had no brakes. When the judge asked if the defense had anything to say, Karen's attorney stood up, then sat right back down. James whispered something to his lawyer, who shook his head like he'd just seen a ghost. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need theatrics. I had the truth and the law. That's what power really looks like. Vindication wasn't loud. It was surgical, and it had just begun. The judge's face told the story before he even opened his mouth. He sat in silence, reading through the last of the exhibits I'd submitted, Highlighted emails, forensic accounting breakdowns, and the real estate logs with Karen's name scribbled across multiple illegal transfers. The more he read, the heavier the silence grew. You could feel the temperature in the courtroom. Drop by degrees, Karen fidgeted with her blouse collar. James tapped a pen so hard against his notepad that the bailiff glanced over. The HOA treasurer had gone pale. Only I stayed still. Hands folded, voice steady, heart pounding like a slow drum roll in my chest. Finally, the judge looked up, leaned slightly forward, and said in a flat, low voice, "Counselor, would you like to make a final statement?" I stood. I didn't need a script. Every word had been burning a hole in my chest for weeks. "Your Honor," I began, voice calm but edged with steel. "This case is not just about a house. It's about the principle that no one, no HOA, no neighbor, no self-proclaimed enforcer of community standards, has the right to take what they do not own. These people didn't just cross a line, they buried it, danced on it, and then handed each other the shovel like it was a trophy." I turned to face the courtroom. I paid for that home in full. I maintained it, I protected it. I lived there peacefully, legally, and proudly. And this board, led by this woman, tried to steal the roof over my head. They mocked me, they vandalized my property. They forged documents and funneled HOA funds into their own pockets. Karen tried to scoff, but it came out more like a hiccup. I didn't stop. They underestimated me because they thought I'd stay quiet, because I wasn't part of their club, because they thought I didn't have the strength to fight back. But what they forgot, I said, letting the moment hang, is that I don't just know the law. I stepped forward, voice rising just enough. I am the law. Dead silence. Then a soft rustle as a few people shifted in their seats, glancing toward Karen and the board, who looked like they'd just been hit by a freight train. The judge nodded slowly, visibly disturbed now. "I've seen fraud. I've seen disputes. But this is coordinated theft under the guise of community governance." He glanced over his glasses at the defense table. "I advise you all to choose your next words very carefully." And that's when the crack finally appeared. The HOA president, James, cleared his throat, leaned into the microphone and said, "Karen made us do it." There was a gasp. She threatened to sue the board personally. Said if we didn't push her acquisition through, she'd file harassment claims, have us recalled. She talked about forcing out every non-HOA homeowner, said she was cleansing the street. We didn't know how far she'd actually go. Karen's face twisted. "That's not true. You signed off. You said, 'Enough,'" the judge snapped. "You'll have your turn to speak when criminal proceedings begin." My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. Ice on the outside, fire on the inside. The judge exhaled. "I am issuing the following rulings." He flipped a page and read from the top. First, full ownership of the property is restored to the plaintiff, effective immediately. All fraudulent documents are nullified, and the original deed stands as sole proof of ownership. Karen sagged in her chair. Second, the defendant, Karen Fletcher, is ordered to pay damages to the plaintiff for property destruction, emotional distress, and legal costs, totaling $187,000. Her eyes bulged. "What?" The judge ignored her. Third, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. This includes charges of forgery, fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and misuse of HOA funds. He turned to the gallery, locking eyes with each HOA board member. As of this ruling, the current HOA board is suspended pending audit and legal review. You will not conduct further business until reviewed by state housing authorities. And then, as if the room had been holding its breath the entire time, it exhaled. A couple reporters rushed outside to make calls. A neighbor actually cheered and then covered his mouth in embarrassment. The bailiff smirked. Karen slumped back, like her spine had given out. James just stared at the table, defeated. I didn't smile, not yet. But I did allow myself to breathe again. After weeks of humiliation, theft, and betrayal, I stood taller than I had in a long, long time, because justice wasn't just done. It roared. Karen didn't walk out of that courtroom. 2 officers escorted her out, hands cuffed behind her back, heels clicking with none of the arrogance she'd strutted in with. She didn't look at anyone. Not the judge, not the press, definitely not me. She was booked that afternoon on charges of real estate fraud, property destruction, conspiracy to commit fraud, and unlawful seizure. The DA was already digging into her past dealings. Turns out, my house wasn't her first stunt, just the most public one. As for the HOA, once the story went viral, especially after local news aired security footage of Karen trashing my house, dozens of homeowners came forward. People who'd been fined into submission, whose requests had been denied mysteriously, whose membership fees had doubled overnight with no explanation. Within a month, a class action lawsuit was filed. I helped organize it pro bono, not because I wanted revenge, at that point I already had mine, but because people needed to know they weren't alone. That what happened to me wasn't just a fluke, it was a pattern. That board dismantled. Every member either resigned or was subpoenaed. Third-party auditor took over temporarily until the state sorted out governance. My house, I didn't sell it. I didn't move out. I rebuilt. It took weeks of cleaning, sanding, patching, and painting. The wine stains on the carpet were impossible to get out, so I ripped it all up and laid down hardwood, rich, warm oak that made the whole place feel new again. I replaced the broken windows with reinforced glass, upgraded the security system, new cameras, new codes, and on the front door, a brand new deadbolt, heavy, sleek, unbreakable. I even added a fresh brass nameplate to the mailbox etched in crisp serif, property of no one but me. Sometimes I still walk the halls at night, running my fingers along the walls, remembering how close I came to losing it all. Not just a house, but peace, dignity, home. And every time I catch my reflection in the hallway mirror, tie loose, sleeves rolled, I smile a little, because they thought I was just a homeowner. They forgot I was also a storm in a suit.